Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect capital, ideas, and people to help make a difference in the world. Today, I am on with my friend, my mentor, Brad Levy, the CEO of Symphony. Brad and I will talk about his extensive career and entrepreneurial journey, as well as discuss the data of everything and the future of data. Brad, thank you so much for agreeing to be on, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kit. You know I love you. I'm rebranding this commiserate with Kit just for the session. But yes, here we go.
So, Amira, everyone knows you're pretty famous, well known in the world of fintech, but not a lot of people know how you got started. So why don't you share a bit with the audience on your origin story?
No, thanks for the opportunity. It really is. It's great. It'll be fun, and I'm really fortunate to be here with you today. So, I'm famous in a very small bubble of hundreds of people, maybe in the market structure, fintech. But I started. I went to a university, State University of New York at Albany, where I went to be an accountant, and I stumbled into a program doing research on municipal finance, public finance. 2-year program. It was pretty deep and involved in a lot of time, but that got me into Wall Street, basically starting at Lehman Brothers as a muni bond public power banker. Basically in 92, 94, I moved to Goldman, and I was a banker for 6 years doing power plants. A lot of the derivative markets evolved in the interest rate swap world on the back of the muni markets. There was a lot of innovation in the 90s. Technology was ramping up, computers. I got a Pentium in 95. It changed my life. So I kind of got the tech bug. I was a little bit geeky, but more like gadgets than tech. And then I just sort of rolled with that for a decade through the 90s. I moved to the syndicate desk late in the 90s as I picked up an e-commerce role as well in munis. I worked on the Y2K project, which was a nightmare in 1999, making sure the machines. So I was the point person for whatever reason in munis doing that project. But then by 2000, I moved into a group called FIC e-commerce at Goldman, which was doing a lot of market structure, fintech in today's terms, I guess. So TradeWeb, FXall, ICE, Market, LoanX, SwapSwire, SwapClear, HubIM, Bond Hub, a lot of products, a lot of innovations, dot-com bubble burst, continue on in the role and start really driving a strategic investments team at Goldman, looking at a portfolio of companies driving these things like Market, like TradeWeb, like ICE. Eventually, doing that job until I left Goldman in 2011 and landed at Market before we went public in 2012. And then, ran a number of businesses for 8 years at Market in loans and derivatives, Market Serve, ClearPar, WSO, with a great team. Went through going public, merging with IHS, and then, wind up moving on from Market in 20. And then joining Symphony in 21 or in 20, and having been here now a couple of years, and since June of 21 in the leadership seat. But it's been a great journey of tech, fintech, markets, banking, syndicate desk, data, trading, processing, clearing, settlements, whatever. So a lot of range across a number of sort of asset classes and front, middle, back office. And I definitely got a lot more global experience after leaving the muni bond business, which was obviously a U.S. only, more domestic, experience. So hopefully just a couple of minutes on 30 plus years, sort of 10 years as an operator, 20 years on the Wall Street side. And Kit, you and I spent a lot of time together in the market years, and, a lot on data, obviously, which has become probably one of the bigger conversations on the planet in the last 5 years.
No, we did indeed. Though, I mean, if I understand correctly, though, even at a young age, you were at some of the biggest tables, right? You were on the board of TradeWeb. Like, these become very successful companies. And so, as a young person in the early days of your career and being in those big seats, like, the pressure must be enormous. Like, how do you manage that mentally?
Yeah, well, I think most days, I think I've managed the mental part well, but maybe the receiving end on any given day in the 80s or 90s, but 2000s. So I'd say number one at Goldman, which is really where I grew up, right from 24 years old to obviously 42 years old. That's a big range. I had children. I moved houses. Like, lots happened during that time. Goldman, you got a lot of experience at Goldman early in your career. It wasn't a very deep firm. It was fairly flat. So by the time you were an associate or a vice president, you were really at a table that was sort of above your pay grade, above your title. So I got into these rooms in broker tech and TradeWeb and like very early. And my peers at these boards at times were very senior people at another bank, and I was a vice president at Goldman. I made MD in 05. So by 2000, 2001, I was operating at a pretty high level, and thanks to Goldman for that opportunity to be in those seats. And then ending, by 2011, I had been chairman of TradeWeb. In 2005, I was chairman of Securities Hub, which did Bond Hub and Communicator. I was vice chairman of Broker Tech Clearing, which eventually became basically the Clearing Corporation, and then did CDS Clearing and was bought by ICE in 2009. That started in 2002. So yeah, there was this, I was 30 years old, but sort of running like a 40-year-old, I guess, in Wall Street age terms. And that was just Goldman's seat, and then the stress side, Goldman was a very collaborative team environment, as was Market. And we ran hard. We were under stress. I think Market was a very similar environment, but you had just this awesome team around you. And even if you were stressed, you had people, and it's just a lot less stressful to be stressed with other people.
Yeah, no, exactly. The one thing I do appreciate about you, and I remember this, at that time you were an exec. You and I had a very heated debate about a topic. I don't remember the exact topic. There were FQs being thrown around. And
I think it might have been probably about QSIPs.
Most likely, yeah. So whatever it was, but it was interesting where I realized you didn't take it personal, right? And it was the next day, hey, Kit, how you doing? Hey, Brad, how you doing? And we continue to collaborate despite the tensions. And what's your view on that in terms of like opposing teams and bringing that tension to the conversation and not just separating the situation versus the personal side of things?
Well, maybe starting with a little bit of cultural, social, right? So I'm from the Northeast, New York, New Jersey area, right? So there's an upfrontness maybe, and even a confrontational element.
That's right.
Right. Then you add maybe, I grew up in a pretty blue collar world, in a good, great life, but it was it was a bit more, managed by conflict. It wasn't war, but there was just and then the next day it was just like, it was fine. And even I'd say immigrant, not that I'm an immigrant, but like, I would say, people in my culture, it's a back and forth, and and I believe like friction has been considered a bad word at times. Like friction is energy. Energy is generally a positive thing, and you get a lot from creating energy. I think if you're not rubbing up against something, then you're probably too far away anyway. I'd rather be a bit overlap, have that hard debate.
That's
Days
right.
of Thunder, the great NASCAR movie, rubbin's racing. Right. If you're going to be in a race, which we all kind of are, there's going to be a bit of rubbing, and it may not be personal at all. And then sometime you may act really badly and it is personal, but I just had a bad day because maybe I just had a bad day. Maybe somebody passed away, that whole, like, you just don't know what's actually going on with someone. So maybe be light on them. And, I like the banter. I like the back and forth. I like to get there by debate. And again, Goldman, Market were places that were, and even Lehman Brothers, I was only there a couple of years, but very much facilitated the debate and the friction. And that's what markets are ultimately. And markets are people. So it's the same thing.
No, that's right. And the one term that, I learned from our ex-colleague, Catherine Allegra, which you and I love the term, which is API, right? Assume positive intent.
Positive intent. I still use that. Yeah.
And what I love about the point you highlight, it's really, even though we have various titles at Market, right? I'm sure the same thing with Goldman, but it was really the best ideas, and it was really about the tension, the conversations, and conflict is actually important, because if everyone has the same idea, then they're redundant, right? There's no diversity.
And we've lost the ability to sort of debate in an open way and walk away okay. I mean, what's gone on in, like, just to get political, the U.S. Congress, right? I kind of liked what I saw because it showed what really goes on and sort of what's, that. And it's like, but it's all in the back room. So many trades are happening upstairs. So many things are happening in the back room. Some people see all that friction, but it's a very limited group. And there's a lot of learning and understanding and just allowing people to come along with it. So I don't mind that. I would like to see more open debate, more honest debate, more factual debate, less personal attacks when you feel like you're not winning.
That's right.
That would probably help. And again, all of us can be there at a time when things are important or emotional or just you have the moment. But yeah, and again, I think passing through time, the Four Agreements is a great book on that. Don't take anything personally, don't make any assumptions that take personally part. You can't really debate if you take things personally. It's just not even possible.
That's exactly it. And you and I touched on this though. As you're going through your career, right? You have to live life. You have your personal life. You have your career. You play different roles. I struggle, going through my career in terms of bringing. I have the kid work version. I got the kid at home version. I got the kid friend version. Like, how do you see that in terms of managing life and career at the same time?
I think, and certainly in this real-time world where things are more connected, this compartmentalization that we are all trying to maybe do is fine. And it's good to separate, your work life from your fun life, from your home life. But the reality is they're all connected at a minimum because you're still just one person with limited time, right? So, the world has forced us a bit to connect these things because we're all just so much more connected with each other and even our own selves to our other selves, like our spouses or our children. And the pandemic has really put that on steroids because it forced us all to be intimate again with the people we didn't even know, maybe like your daughter, right? So I think I've come to this, I'm one person, I have to have one system of values, one way of working, meaning just doing things. And then I just try to apply it in the right ratios, like a portfolio, to run my life in a balanced way. You can't run balanced at equilibrium. You have to run in balance, and there's a lot of gyro that you need to course correct. So I've done a lot of that in my life. I know I spend more time working, but I think I spend more quality time when I'm not working because I'm more present, and that's that whole be present part, right? That other kind of goofy midlife crisis-y, but everybody's saying it, and it's probably true. So
Yeah.
it's that, be present. You're one person, apply the same person everywhere, but not in equal parts, because that's not really possible. I know I commute, I know I get in the office. I just know I'm spending more time away from my wife and my kids than my work. But I really have, tried to make the last 10 years, those moments, just have to be leveraged more because you're not physically spending as much time on them. So, but then it takes effort and athleticism, and often two ways. I can do what I want and try to get there with, say, my wife or husband, but unless the receiving end, the API, right?
Yeah.
The plug and socket, it won't work unless it's a combination of two sides. And then even with children and everything, there's a lot of triangulation.
That's right. And how do you manage life then with data? Because if people say you can't improve what you can't measure, right? You can't progress. And so whether it's in career, whether it's personal life, because I was talking to someone the other day, it's like, I track everything. I write down my mood for the morning. I track my weight. I track what I eat. I put data in everything I do. I'm like, well, I thought all the tech firms already do that on your behalf. Why are you doing it yourself? What is your view around using and managing data and the world we're living in now, where data is everything and everywhere?
Yeah. There's moderation and degrees of things. It's great to have a ton of data, but if you're spending a ton of time collecting your data, then maybe you're spending a little more time collecting than you should, right? Versus just letting the data be collected. Or I used to put everything into Quicken, everything. In 19, I tracked everything. Over 10 or 15 years, I didn't need to do that because the muscle memories were there. And then I could just run and know by the analytics that things were fine, right? Where money was going or whatever. So actually yesterday I had it all hands, and I talked about and I believe in this from Dr. Strange quote, you can't really fight the raging river. You really have to succumb to the current on some level
That's
because we're
right.
in it. I love that quote from the ancient one, but there's an element of you just have to be willing to ride the data, right? I can't avoid giving up my life to Amazon and Google and Microsoft. I just can't. I can't live without these things. I hope to change that someday a little bit. So there's a ride, deal, and create. And I think in that order for one human, because we're small. Figure out what you can ride. Then there's just some stuff you have to deal with. But then there's also, once you figure that out a bit, there's a ton you can create. And sometimes it's taking those things, putting them in a ball and adding your seasoning. Most invention is stealing combo and creation on top. So I think ride, deal, and create is how I just think about things now more, going with the flow, finding the time to jump out of the river a bit, jump back in, because I now have a little bit more control than I maybe did when I thought I could control everything as a 29-year-old.
Yeah, that's right. And how do you perceive data at an institutional level for companies? You know, whether it's an asset manager, a bank, like how do you think firms should think about data and also how they collaborate with themselves using data as a community?
Well, the trigger for me there is the word institutional. I think we have to think of institutions as things added up versus something at the top that's pushed down. So atomic, like we should be thinking about data at a much more atomic, granular level. We should be putting that data in a way to define it, right? So at least could be found and understood. Ability to protect it at times, depending on sensitivity. Things go from not sensitive to super sensitive to not sensitive. Like think about if we could manage government documents in the US in a way where it could be classified, declassified in a smart contracted blockchain, right? Just like that would be a way, but it's got to be atomic. And then you can add up how the US government protects its documents, as opposed to say, there's all this paper stamped by weird people nobody knows anymore. There's folders that's nothing in it. That's a folder and a file. Like, where's that file? That could be a block of data. So I think institutions need to take a bottom-up approach to data, protect it, forget the system administrator authorizing people, right? And then ultimately you'll add up to do things versus try to figure out what's going on from, the dashboard down, right? It's got to be this much more, and like, so your employees are assets and liabilities that have social security numbers and do tasks. That's all data to be collected and monitored and managed, but within the bounds of legal and what people are comfortable with being surveilled on.
That's right. And how do you see what Symphony is doing more of connecting the industry and really helping with that data journey?
Yeah. Well, I love talking about Symphony, and thank you for the softball, because our DNA is a distributed network that's end-to-end encrypted where we do not have keys, right? So we are remote work and distributed tech where no matter what you're doing between, say, an investment bank and an asset manager, we only know there's a technology connection, and then it's a human or a bot maybe, but we just do not know what is going on inside of that conversation. We can't get to it, right? So it's that we take a very end-to-end node level, firm level, business level, rule level, node level human, right? We go right down to the individual and every single thing they can get access to. And we don't see that, but we give our clients that control. So that's been from a day one, so we think we're built for purpose, obviously. And then we find the use cases where, yeah, it could just be a general chat. Anybody could get it. It's not controversial. Or there's a bunch of offline conversations happening on WhatsApp. We need to pull one side of the conversation on that needs to be recorded. So we do that. Or there's really sensitive documents that need to run through DLP processes, et cetera. And we offer those technologies or integrating with what you have. So everything we do is about facilitating interaction, automations, all of these things, but without ever really seeing the content or knowing the nature of the interactions between the institutions, the business, and the person. So, but that's, we're 9-ish years into that journey. I think it's a 30, 40-year creation. Like we've created an upside down sort of, we have to authenticate first to do anything versus I'd like to do more things without them knowing who I am, like buy shampoo, get a bank loan.
That's right. But Symphony's evolved quite a bit since you became CEO, right? It's changed dramatically. I mean, you were giving me a demo the other day. I was like, that's Symphony?
Yeah. No, it's now a full communication platform at a minimum, because we have a whole telephony business now and Trader Voice that we acquired with Cloud9. So we were definitely a collaboration stack led by chat, screen share, file share, doc share. Now we have a great voice business, and we've bought an identity platform called Street Links for really creating your profile for purpose. And then this natural language processing business we just acquired in Thanksgiving. So, we are pipes and rails that are secure. We allow people to put cars and, rail car, trains, whatever on them. We can really populate the right passengers in the right cars to be with each other because they want to exchange research or whatever, right? We curate at the neighborhood level, and then that adds up to count communities, which are run as states, right? As we're going like person, you connect with this person because you want to settle that trade more quickly.
That's
So
right.
now we're into the like settling fixed income and how could we help make that a better process? T+1 settlement in equities. How can we help people resolve exceptions while we're not the settlement system? We could be the system to point you to the thing that you're missing, right? So we're doing a lot of cross asset, front, middle, back office, regional skew, so we're taking a much, 20 real awesome capabilities versus maybe 3 years ago, and applying them to the repo market, to the loan market, to the new issue fixed income versus the secondary. So yeah, I mean, the product, the technology itself is actually quite good. Like I know decent product, and our industry has some. It's a good product. Like I use it all day. I use the telephony. We have intercoms between all of us now internally. A product we'll be putting into the market this year called Instant Voice, which is weaving voice into the stack, not video with voice, not chat, but actual, two-way, hey, I need to talk right now.
Yeah.
So there's, a lot of, and then the whole like federation of the compliance issues around WhatsApp and SMS and giving people a solution that they can let people on those on the other side, but you need to be archived and recorded. So that's been, an interesting in 22 and 23. It's still getting a lot of attention. It's not just the bank. So that's, that common communication platform for many channels, and then really getting specific things done in prime brokerage, equity settlement, client onboarding, all the things that we were involved in, to a great degree in our days at IHS Markit.
No, it is, and I see the omni-channel Brad Levy built into Symphony.
I've been pitching you on this for 12 years. I mean, we
That's-
built a product collaboration services between 12
right.
and 14 at Market, which was a directory and federating chats across maybe Link or Sky, anything.
That's
That
right.
product sold into Symphony in 14. So we've gotten it, and usually, early, you have to be early. You can't be on time, and late is late. We've worked on this as an industry since Hub IM in 2001 with Communicator. There's a few things, there's many chat systems, and, Symphony seems like well placed at the right time with the right team, solving actual challenges or allowing people to scale their business in a modern, cloudy way.
So let's backtrack a little bit, because you definitely had an amazing career before Symphony, but Symphony was actually your first role as a CEO. How has that transformed or changed the way you lead, and how has that, what have you learned from being a CEO over the last few years?
Yeah, and I'll say Goldman somewhat just in leadership-y, but Market really taught me a lot about leading. And Lance, as you know, gave all of us, a lot of room to run, a lot of entrepreneur. I ran a world of people at Market that was twice the size of the number of people at Symphony, right? 1,200 and 600, right? So it was loans at six, two big orgs. We also ran down to the data center, really. So we did run like engineers up. So it was full stack. I did a lot of location stuff. So I think Market did a really good job of not just making me an operator more, but preparing me for a full stack, full firm role. So I felt like, and I did a lot of transformation stuff and innovation stuff with you, right? In terms of, change and, challenging restructurings and all of those tough things through, very volatile times as well. And then I came to Symphony as, not the CEO. I was president and chief commercial officer, but the difference is, there is nobody determining the outcome of the company day to day above me, right? Literally, like there's no Lance. Like I sat as a CEO of Market Serve into a company that, from investors' perspective, say we were inside of that conversation, right? I knew investors well, but not as managing them as a CEO, because I was inside of a division, right?
Yeah.
But the idea that it's really just you have no boss. You have a board, which is a governance, and certainly you drive the outcomes and data, here's your scorecards, but you don't wake up every day thinking, if I do a good job, that person does well with the board, right? This is just me. The accountability's higher, responsibility for 600 people's kind of careers. It's a much bigger sort of, I would say, pressure, like on some level of just a responsibility, accountability. That's definitely feels different. But then I sort of come back around to we have a our exec has been, the 2 year, everybody, it's a totally new exec. Our operating leadership is, kind of 80% change, and the firm is about half. So we've had a lot of change in the last 2 years, and we've had a lot of people joining both by being hired, as well as, about 100 people came in by acquisition. So we've got, this whole new firm, and yes, the responsibility is high being a CEO, true of a standalone company, certainly in a private market, in a growth time in our, life, which has been challenging, for the last
Yeah.
year. So for the year and a half I've been CEO, being a CEO of a growth company, still coming out through scale up, it's been a really interesting time to sit but the team is phenomenal, and that's probably 75% of my equation. Is I definitely get done what I get done because of the team and my ability to not feel super stressed because everybody's counting on me, which is, again, just, somewhat reality of that. But I don't feel that way because the team is strong and we're in a good spot as in a sector way, right? We're just in the right side of the industry. But it's
That's
still,
right.
it's a fight every day, and, that's sure it is.
But what's been the toughest moment or toughest challenge that you experienced being a CEO?
I think it's the making sure things are going internally and really having to deal with the client side very overtly, which I did a lot of that at Market for sure. But then that investor board, it's a triangle every quarter, and I have to really ebb and flow my time and attention without being not aware or too involved and even micromanaging. So I think it's that third leg of board investor. I understand it because I've been on the other side of that a lot, but that gyro I have to manage on really a quarterly rhythm, finance committee, board meeting, strategy meeting, how are things going, course corrects, restructuring, selling to clients, pumping people up. There's a lot, being on panels, talking to friends like Kit.
Yeah.
So there's just an ebb and flow to where I spend my time, I guess. And I have a hardcore third leg now, which is the board and the investors.
Yeah. So how critical is building that resilient mental state as you're going through that?
I'll use a word before resilient, and it's flexible. Like, I think you got to build a flexible state that can also be resilient. Obviously, things that are too flexible will just not be supportive enough or even break. So to me, it's like software, like enough flexibility to get exactly done when you need and spin it up, shut it down, while you get that I'm 5 nines. So I've definitely developed, I'd say, more elasticity in the last decade. That's both about my view, where I spend my time, my style, and that's created what I think of as resiliency. Plus, I have plenty of scar tissue over 1987 to 2021 on things going not my way. So that I have more flexibility, therefore resiliency, mostly because of all the horrible, harder things that have happened, either to me or around me, which is not horrible, by the way, but that's where I built resiliency, but probably more through flexibility.
Yeah. So let's go back a bit to, you mentioned earlier, midlife crisis. How are things with the midlife crisis?
Well, if I could live to 100, which I think it's going to be 150 or 200 because science is moving. So let's assume I am midlife, meaning 100. So I got plenty of time, lots of lives to live for decades to come. I think it's you've got to be working hard at every stage in life, right? Even when you're old and less physically, you just got to be working at it, because that's the way you get relationships. That's what you have fun, get things done. So I think I expect to work hard until I don't, which is the end, right? So that's just, there's no retirement, right? And I'm not talking just about work.
Yeah.
So I'd say that I will continue to work hard at having a good life. And not, and that includes maybe being involved with people in business. I have no idea. I think health, just mental health and physical health, has probably become much more prominent in everybody's mind. And my wife and I talk about it a lot. My kids, my wife and I talk about it a lot. My friends. So it's definitely like everybody's just more serious about, you could have a lot, but if that doesn't go well, everything else gets really irrelevant quickly. So that cliche, but health And I think the mental part has probably come more into the fore in the last 5 or 10 years, and you could talk about it. And then again, like, just there's no better way to deal with the fact that time is fading than to try to keep growing, right? So you just keep fighting the fact that maybe like June 21st is not, the days get shorter starting at the beginning of the summer. People think the summer's bright, but it actually gets darker every day, at least in the northern. So it's just like
That's
that.
right.
I just don't think too much about time and midlife as much as why wouldn't I want to have fun and grow as much as I can until it truly stops, which could be tomorrow, could be right after this call. I don't think so, by the way. I think I feel fine.
Yeah, I hope not. But by the way, you raise a good point because at our age, we go to more funerals than weddings, right? And so we're seeing people just dropping right in front of us.
Well, you're in your 40s, right? So I'm now in my early 50s, and what nobody told me about the 50s, but what I now know is true, is it's a bit of a death decade because you actually do know people in the 50s that die. It's early, but it's more common, and it's certainly, I've had a bit of that in my colleagues, my best friends. So that people die in their 50s. So your real peers, and people have children that have real problems, like in their 20s, right? So overdoses, that's certainly a thing, and I've known those people. And everybody's parents are in the challenging moments. So you're really, I thought when you'd feel old and it was more the decade of death, like as you go through life, I thought that would be later than the 50s, but I'm like, wow, this is a interesting decade. These 40s are not nearly as, it doesn't have that, you kind of, that's why the 50s to me are, and Gen X even as a generation is an interesting one because it's that 45 to 60-ish,
That's
whatever. So welcome to that, but that's the point. Like I've had a bit of that, and it does, if you listen, you're just more present, at least for a minute after, if not a bit of a tattoo. Like, this could all kind of not go this well, so maybe enjoy it.
Yeah. Now you're a big yogi guy, right? How much does yoga help you with all of this as well?
For like 10 years, I mean, I started doing it in Boulder, which is a bit of a mecca, but I just kept it in my life for a day or two a week, and I just like it. I don't feel like I'm going to an exercise class, and I definitely get a lift physically. I get more flexible, stronger, but it's definitely a calming 75-minute. Like it definitely forces you to be present when you're in a room of people that are trying to vibrate high but more even. Like your vibration probably goes up and gets a little bit less sawtoothy. So I just like it to a degree. Like I think anything in moderation is good, but you can definitely do too much, and it's actually could be pretty strenuous. But I just love it. It's that physically I've liked it from day one. The mental part probably came 5 years in where I'm like, wow, it really is a bit quieting, and I could use that. And then it's it's a good environment. Like I like going to a gym. Like I just like being around people that are trying to maybe just be a bit more healthy.
Yeah, no,
So yeah, it's a good and it's an interesting way to me be in a community of people that I wouldn't naturally kind of plop in the middle of a room. People that do yoga are not. I stick out a bit still. It's become much more popular in the last 5 years, but I just it's definitely it's just it's a multi-threat as terms of a thing you do, and it feels a little bit more like medicine at times than the gym.
Yeah, 1,000%. Well, Brad, thank you so much for being on today. It's been great. I'm seeing people pinging me on these nuggets of insights and knowledge that you provide. People are loving it. As with tradition, to close it out, how can the audience help you in terms of what would be some of you to ask from the audience that's watching this?
Yeah. So I'll get both aggressive and cliche, like help yourself first, right? If you don't help yourself, you can't help anybody. But then let's say I'm interested in moving the world along in fintech and market structure. So be open to change, just like as a human, including, I try to tell myself that more often than not. Have a view to debate, right? Create some net outcome that's different because you were in the room and present and had a view. And then build or support builders. Like the only thing that's relevant is when things actually get built. It could be software, it could be a bridge, but if you're not actually building something, which a lot of people don't, make sure that the builders, the product, and it's the engineer, it could be the business people. Like there's lots of people that build things. So I think And then collaborate, compete, and create is a nice 3C. I think you just get better by working together. If we compete a bit with each other for something like resources, we'll probably have a better outcome and even preserve a resource. And then again, create or maybe support creators. But that's more general. But I like to work with those folks. I like to have them as clients, and I think it could probably help all of us just to put these rules in place, not just for business but for life. And instead of yelling at the politicians,
That's right.
look in the mirror. We elected them, and they might actually represent us too well.
That's right. That's right. And then for those that are in the world of finance and capital markets, if you haven't seen the latest version of Symphony, I highly, highly encourage you to do so. I was extremely impressed. I was like, wow, this is what Symphony looks like now. It's amazing. So
Yeah, and thank you for
Brad.
that, Kit. We are just getting started, but we can't do anything without people like you engaging, including like both loving and hating our product at times. We need the feedback. So come on and tell us what you think.
That's right. Well, thank you, Brad. And thank you, audience, for continued support. And next week, I will be on with two amazing entrepreneurs that's actually out there to change the world of real estate. So tune into next week to listen to me and Boris Genovac and Ryan Smith, the founders of ResiTrade, to talk about what they're doing around real estate. Stay tuned. Thank you, everyone, and appreciate it as always. Thank you, Brad.